Welcome back to Death Toll Racing. If you're familiar with this channel at all, you'll know that every project that rolls to my shop will end up with my mag drill stuck to it at one point or another. This is probably one of my favorite tools in the shop. As far as being universal, using it, making a difficult task somewhat easy after a little bit of setup. Very, very handy tool. The problem is they're really expensive. Until recently. So we have some options now when it comes to mag drills, one of which maybe you could justify. So let's do a comparison between my Vevor 8850 that they just sent me to my old 206 Slugger, and we'll see if that Vevor can't hold its own against a mag drill that costs 4 times the price. All right, so how we're going to work this, I'm going to do a point system. For every feature I like better on one, or every test we do on one or the other, we're going to issue a point. So let's start off with a couple of features that I can immediately divvy out some points on. The very first thing I want to point out is something that frustrates me. It's my biggest complaint about the Slugger, so I'm going to just get this one out of the way right away. Every time I turn on this Slugger, it's going full speed. And to slow it down, if you're using a larger broach, hole cutter, hole saw, whatever you're using, if you need to slow the drill bit down, you have to then press slow. Hold slow and it'll slow it down. And then you'll have the proper RPM, you can make your cut, then release and move on. The problem is, next time I turn it on, it's going full speed again. I have to do that every time, and it is very, very frustrating. That is addressed on the Vevor with this variable speed control knob right here. So whatever you set it at, that's the speed it's going. So to start it off, Vevor, 1 point. All right, so on to the second point up for grabs. This is going to be the style of tool holder that they have. Okay, so the Slugger uses a Morse taper, which is this, and it actually uses number 3. And all those are is a really long taper, so they lock in. This is an adapter to use a smaller one into a bigger one. They lock in via that taper. So the top is flat and it goes in that groove. They do have to be lined up. However, you shouldn't be actually driving off that top part. You're driving off the friction on here. That top part is actually to get the two apart. So like on this Slugger here, you have a keyway there, and that's how you get it out. So it works really well. That's been around for a really long time and it's very common. So that's a Morse taper number 3. And I do like that setup. However, there are a few cons with it. So let's move on to the Vevor. The Vevor uses what I believe is, and it actually took quite a bit of research to figure this out. I've never seen this before. It is called a Nito One Touch. So what that does is it has 3 grooves, and then a deeper ball groove. Some of them are just flat with a ball groove or with a ball detent in it. So it'll be flat and then there'll just be a ball detent. I think either one will work just fine. It's just how they decided to machine them. And then how that works is you just stick it in there and then it locks in just like that. So really, really clever, really, really easy to use. However, there's also some drawbacks to that style. The biggest drawback, it's not very common. So when you're going to buy what I would call a broach, but it's actually called like an annular cutter, Vevor calls them a core drill. If you're buying core drills, to have that Nito style is not nearly as common as just having the flat. So they'll usually have 2 flats, and that will be called a weld-on 3/4. That is the most common. That's all my tooling like this. I have a lot of tooling. It's all weld-on 3/4, so none of that will work on this Vevor without an adapter. Good news, link in the description below for an adapter to go from this Nito style to a standard weld-on 3/4. There's pros and cons. I don't really know who to give the point to in that. I think that is very speculative. It's going to be more opinion-based than fact-based, but I am going to give it to Slugger just because I already have a ton of tooling that fits this, and none of it will fit that without an adapter. So 1 point to Slugger. So I am going to issue a point right now for Vevor for no freaking reason whatsoever. No, I'm just kidding. Because they sent 6 cutters with it. You don't get that with Slugger, but you do with the Vevor. So I'm going to go ahead and give them 1 point because that is pretty valuable. Okay, so now for weight. With no chuck in it whatsoever, It's a little bit speculative that the Slugger gets an advantage here because it basically can't hold anything right now, where this thing can directly hold a broach or a annular cutter, where that thing would need an adapter to do the same. But either way, we're just going to do it with nothing in them. 24.4 pounds on the Vevor. So there is a little, that doesn't really feel that much different actually. Oh, 30.6 pounds. So about 5 pounds different, well, 6 pounds different. Yep, 6.2 pounds different. 1 point Vevor. That is extremely convenient having less weight. And also I had the cutting fluid tank and stuff on the Vevor, and I didn't have it on the Slugger, so that wasn't actually fair. So more than 6 pounds lighter for the Vevor. Okay, so now we're gonna do cutting diameter. The biggest cutting diameter we can do. I can tell you right now, just by looking at it, that the 1 point is going to go to Slugger. It looks like it has a max diameter, we're gonna say, of 3.5. That would be diameter, not radius. And then this guy is going to have a max diameter of 2.5. So 2.5 versus 3.5, 1 point to Slugger. So now we're going to test how much downward force these the magnets basically can withhold. 457. Oh, 455. There it goes. 475. One thing I do want to point out is this is a little speculative between the two because the center line of the Vevor is a little closer to the magnet, hence the smaller cutting diameter capability. And we got 477. So definitely 1 point to Vevor. It held down harder. (108 RPM would be minimum. This does have a 2-speed gearbox on this one. So I'm going to turn it onto the faster setting, and we're going to see what the max RPM is. So this is kind of speculative, and I don't actually know how to judge this. So Vevor technically had a wider range of RPM. So I feel like it deserves a point. So we'll give it a point for the wider range of RPM. However, I'm also going to give a point to the Slugger for having a 2-speed gearbox, because that is extremely valuable to have a 2-speed gearbox. So 1 point for Slugger. So we're kind of ended up being kind of at a draw, and I don't know if that was 100% fair to Vevor or not. But it is a feature that this has that Vevor doesn't. So I forgot to push start on our timer, so that wasn't really fair. It did a great job though. It had plenty of power, way more power than it needed, and it had more than enough magnetic power. Okay, this is about the same RPM, approximately, on this one. Again, it had 0 problems with it. I believe they were about equally as smooth. I know that this Slugger has more power than the Vevor does, but the Vevor had 0 problems drilling that same hole with the same cutter. It was not even remotely an issue. So I don't really know which one to give points to cutting with a 27mm hole. It was pretty irrelevant. It's way easier to put the cutter in the other one, but we already addressed that in a different point series. So I'm just going to call it a wash on the smaller stuff because neither one did particularly better than the other. All right, there is one more feature that I wanted to point out, and that's when I was setting up for the next test, and that is the fact that on a mag drill, you usually have 2 slides. You have this slide, and then you have like a pre-positioned slide, which is this one. On the Slugger, it's toolless to do that. On the Vevor, you actually need to loosen an Allen screw like this to do the same, which is not ideal. So let's give a point to Slugger for having a toolless adjustment there. Okay, so for this next test, I wanted to see what the maximum height distance, and I'm going to just be fair here, and the majority of the time I feel like most of us are going to be using standard drill bits. So I'm just going to put the chucks in, and I'm going to retract the jaws all the way up, and I'm going to measure what the maximum height of the mag drill is, because that is a limiting factor on a lot of them. So I'm going to basically run these as high up as they can go, which on this one is right there. Let's go up. That is its max height, so we'll do a measurement there. And that is just about 7 3/4. We'll give it 7 3/4 on the Slugger. Now let's set up this guy, and this is where the tool, okay, that's all the way up there. That's all the way up there. I don't believe we have nearly as much height on the Vevor. That is 5 1/4. So what did we say? 7 3/4 versus 5 1/4. So that is definitely a point to the Slugger. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill a hole in a 1/4-inch wall tubing while the mag drill is positioned horizontally, and see how awkward that is to do. One thing else that I wanted to point out is this material, I have it seam side out so that it's not flat. That's making the magnet work a little harder than normal, but that's kind of a real world scenario. That's why I put the piece on this way. So let's see if it has enough holding power on a wobbly surface to do this 3/8 hole. So that was no issue whatsoever for this one. Let's do the same with the other drill. And this is where this drill is quite easy to use in this scenario because it's lighter. And even though it's only 6 pounds lighter, that makes a world of difference. Okay, so this drill is definitely more awkward to use. So this is that's pretty normal for it to come off that easily, especially when you have a seam going right down the middle. So it does seem a little weaker than the other one though. That is actually pretty odd. I don't know why that's being so weak. Okay, well, let's give her a go. This is a pretty normal scenario for me, drilling like this. I'm in the wrong gear. This is where that Vevor makes it actually quite a bit easier. So again, that wasn't an issue. Even though it comes off pretty easy, it still has more than enough power to drill that. However, in that scenario, I'm not gonna lie, that Vevor is significantly easier to use. So let's give 1 point to Vevor for that thing being lighter and easier to manage. All right, guys, summary time. Points are up above. I'm not sure how we panned out on either one of those, which one won my points system. But anyway, they're right there. So you can use those for whatever it's worth to you. But I'm going to tell you right now, my honest review, if I were to go do, say I was building a car hauler right now and I needed a fish plate frame on it, or I was repairing a crack in a frame and I was putting a big fish plate on, I would grab the Vevor. It's lighter, it's easier to use, it seems like it hangs on to thinner metal like that. Car, truck, even heavy truck frames aren't very thick compared to industrial types scenarios. They're not very thick at all. So this thing would definitely be the one I would grab. 99% of the time I feel like I'd grab that one. The only benefit I see to the Slugger is the ability of it to come up higher, the head unit to come up higher. That's the only benefit to that, and that's really my only hesitation on me not just selling this one right away. I'm probably going to hang on to it for a little while as I use that Vevor. And if it's something where I keep coming back to this one to use it because it has that additional height, then I'll hang on to it. Otherwise, I'm probably going to sell it because this is a great unit for someone who does red iron or someone who uses a mag drill a ton. This will be a good unit for them. And for me, that Vevor is going to fit the bill quite well. So that is my honest opinion on the end. So definitely use the link and the promo code below to save, I think it's 5% or whatever, but it gives me credit on the sale. So it'll allow me to do this type of thing more often. So anyway, thanks for watching. We will see you again real soon. Like, subscribe, share. See you next time.